In a moment, we're going to get to what will be a very big week in the impeachment inquiry. But first, some really interesting new poll numbers to tell you about. The latest numbers from the New York Times Siena College poll in 6 key battlegrounds show former Vice President Joe Biden leads the Democratic primary field in 5 of the 6 states. Biden has an 8 to 9 point advantage in Arizona, Florida, and Michigan. In North Carolina, Biden is ahead by 14 points and up 12 points in Pennsylvania. In Wisconsin, Biden and Senator Elizabeth Warren are statistically tied for first.
So, Adrian, here we go again. Joe Biden fares well not only against Donald Trump in the swing states, he fares much better against Democrats themselves in this intramural battle. In these swing states. Again, the question, and again, it's a question a lot of people are asking because they're trying to figure out whether Biden is going to make it to South Carolina if he finishes in 4th in Iowa and New Hampshire. The question is, will Joe Biden ever be given an opportunity to show where his strength lies?
Yeah, well, Joe, that's the big question here. And we know that in a lot of states, there are still voters who are undecided, still a significant number of voters who are undecided. But Joe Biden has remained at the top of the polls in some of these very key battlegrounds, despite what Donald Trump has been trying to do with impeachment and the Ukraine situation. He is still remaining on top. And the question becomes, where are things in December? Where are things in January? We know that when families go home for Thanksgiving and have long conversations, they're off work for a couple days. That's when people really start to solidify their decisions in terms of who they're supporting in this primary. So far, though, Joe Biden, despite the fact that he's had some campaign stumbles, especially on the fundraising front, he still remains on top. So it's going to be interesting to see how the next few weeks shake out when voters really start to make their decisions.
Yeah, Mika, it's really a tale of 2 races. And the first are those early states, Iowa and New Hampshire, where Joe Biden's not doing well. But you move beyond that. If you look at South Carolina, if you look at most of the other states around the country, Joe Biden's doing well. But again, how does Biden endure a poor finish in Iowa, a poor finish in New Hampshire, and still stick around?
Yeah.
Does the momentum shift? Of course, there is a solution to that. Joe Biden can actually double down in Iowa and actually have a strong showing there, because the strong showing by Joe Biden in Iowa
would be big,
actually, like Barack Obama in 2008, really paves the way towards a nomination win if he can do it. But right now, he just can't seem to gain any momentum in the first state. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.